who is the founder and CEO of White Hat Junior, an edtech startup which was sold to Byju's within 18 months of founding. Other than that, Karan is a best-selling author. His first book, Keep Off the Grass, sold more than 70,000 copies in the year of release itself. For this session, we have Prakash Sharma as moderator. NowFest was his brainchild, and he is also the co-founder of 1001 Stories India, a behavioral science and context architecture firm. So yeah, let's get started. Over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Shrishti, for that lovely introduction. And Karan, welcome to the NowFest.
Pleasure to be here.
It is fun having you here, and we are going to be speaking for around 30 minutes. We're going to touch certain topics. We have a lot of people who have been very curious. We got a lot of requests from all over the world saying we definitely want to hear Karan's point of view on certain things.
Sure.
So as we start, we are. I think it makes sense for us to start with the journey right from the beginning. You are a product of IIM Bangalore, and from there onwards, you transitioned your career rather quick, and you became an author. You wrote two, Johnny Got Down and Keep Off the Grass. Let's start with hearing your journey from the student from IIMB to this author with his books out.
So the kind of the journey was that I was always a reader, a very avid reader all my life, right? And then I would say the true starting point of the journey was that after I am joining Procter & Gamble, I had a chance to go to Philippines, right? And this was 2002 when there were not too many Indians, etc., in Philippines, right? And so I was very when I went there, I didn't know anyone, and I was very kind of solitary, right? And I think I started to hike there and travel, and around that time, I think the first act of leaving your own country and what you know, and living alone in a different place really kind of I can't see you anymore, my friend. Are we still on the connection? Yeah, sorry.
My bad.
Yeah.
You were saying, you're talking about your journey with P&G.
Yeah, so I would say the act of like leaving, like the known world, if you will, which is the kind of, I'd known India and had a lot of friends here, and to go to a unknown country and be alone there was really refreshing, because I started to do things that were very authentic to me. So I started to hike a lot, travel a lot. Then I left my job, backpacked for a year. Around that time, I wrote my first novel. So I think that's probably how I started, right? Till then, I didn't have any aspirations of writing, but I started to do things that were very authentic to me, because I wasn't surrounded by too much public opinion once I left India. Yeah.
Karan, Keep Off the Grass, we can straight up make the connection, because as IIMB, you're a student out there, and it's a world of intense pressure. And then there is a world point of view from outside IIMB. The way people interpret all these august institutions.
Yeah.
Then there is a point of view when you're inside the gate already. Getting them is very difficult.
Yeah.
So it is kind of easy to make that connection, and I think we'll come back to it in some time.
Yeah.
How did Johnny Gone Down? How did that happen?
A lot of the two things happened simultaneously, right? One was Johnny Gone Down, for those, obviously, for the most of you who haven't read it, is a bit of a Forrest Gumpish kind of story about a guy who, it kind of ends up in adventures in Cambodia, Brazil, the US, basically it's a travel backpacking kind of a novel, right? The obviously the inspiration of that was that I took a year off to backpack on my own, right? And I lived in all these places that I wrote about, Cambodia, Brazil, etc. And then a lot of Johnny Gone Down is about a man embracing his destiny, right? And I was going through the same phase where at 30, right, when I had gone to travel, I came back, right? Around 30, everybody around me was getting settled, right? People were having jobs, getting married. And at 30, I was like without a job, backpacking, and like no horizon of marriage, kids, houses, etc. And I at that time was a bit confused with where my life was going, right? Because that was not the script that, had been that was not the script, that was what I'd planned to live when I was in IIM and stuff, right? So part of the novel was about just like a man embracing his destiny, which is around what happened to me, right? I started to realize that, look, I'm gonna be on my own path, and I can't live a relative life which is not authentic to me anymore. And so a lot of my choices around that were linked to that, right? I just did my own thing.
How did yoga happen? I see you also identify as a yogi. This is what I understand. Help us understand a little bit about
it's
that.
not a yogi. I mean, that's a very big word, I mean, I did yoga for a year. So I left my job in 2000, I don't know now, 13, maybe 2013, right? So after 2010, I came back to New York. I worked for a couple of years, and then I left my job again to go very deep into my yoga practice. And I lived in an ashram for a year in the Himalayas, right? So that's where I learned yoga. Now, I mean, people have called this becoming a yogi, but I really learned the physical discipline of yoga in a very austere kind of environment, right? Like, so yoga in the ashram was like 5 o'clock in the morning till midnight, day on day for, a year, right? So I learned yoga very deeply. Now, I don't know how much it changed me as a person, but it did really give me the physical discipline of yoga, which has lived with me for my life since then. Yeah.
There is, there is this entire world where we talk about motivation as being the all-powerful element. We have got movies after movies. We have got the Rocky montage. We got Shah Rukh Khan telling his, as a coach saying 70 minutes. We got Al Pacino talking about the whole motivation thing, pep talks, right?
Yeah.
And so we make our motivation to be this one really powerful solution to all our problems and changes. Now, how do you see motivation, or do you think there's a different answer to this? Is there a systematic answer to follow? How would you look at that?
Yeah, so I think maybe very related to that. Also, I feel that a person should just basically, the epitome of spirituality is to basically lose yourself completely in what you do and have no sense of self or I left at all, right? Which you're completely subsumed in what you do, right? So I would say that's kind of like many people call it motivation. They call it the flow state. This is the moment, this is the meaning of life, right? To lose yourself completely. I feel like I do, when I do something, I do it with almost that same state, right? I do feel that the only difference is that I've accepted that some people are meant for narrow vertical specialization. And that's great. Like a Warren Buffett does financial investing all his life for 40, 50 years and becomes a very deep expert in that. And then there are people like us who are just wanderers and travelers, and they have a place in the world, right? So I'm a person who likes to climb new peaks, challenge myself, and then abandon it and start afresh again. So I'm okay, right? I've realized that that's fine, right? Some people will be wanderers and travelers. So I've like done multiple things, right? And I've done them to a level, but maybe like if I went very deep into just writing and I was spending 20 years writing, I would be a great writer. But I did my writing, reach some kind of a creative peak in my definition, then abandoned writing and did yoga. Then I reached some kind of a peak there. I abandoned yoga, did corporate, then I became the CEO of Discovery, abandoned that, did a startup. Now I sold a startup. I'm just doing different things, right? Because I get interested in, when I get interested in something, it becomes my life for a period of time. And then I feel like once I've reached a point at which I know what to do, I like to kind of deconstruct things completely and start from zero. And I think that I'm very motivated while I'm doing that, but I don't think everybody's destiny is to be in a narrow vertical expertise field. And I think there's a different kind of a life which is possible as well, right? Which is a more experimentative, curious life. And I did that. Yeah.
Karan, you talked about motivation not being the all-powerful factor. It is an important factor, but I just heard you say, and I was curious it caught my attention because it said you kind of make the change. It almost sounds like what we hear about Olympic level athletes, fantastic musicians who kind of follow a certain ritual, or they transition from one state to the other, especially before a state of, let's say, performing in front of the audience and all. Are there rituals that that you have built up for yourself?
I think so. I meditate every day. So I meditate in the morning and night, right? That's coming from 2013 when I lived in an ashram. And I think for the last 7 years, that's been a consistent, regular part of my life, right? I think so I think that's a very, very formative part of my life, right? It really gives me a lot of center to to kind of slow my life down and live it very authentically. Then I would say, so those are, I would say, daily practices, but I would say there is this stoic philosophy of willful poverty, right? Where, which I think is very Buddhist as well, where you should train yourself to live with very less, right? So much of my pursuits like hiking, living in an ashram, etc., are attuned towards this idea that, look, you can live for very long periods of time with very less, right? With a backpack, with a bag, and that kind of gives you a very deep sense that, look, there is very little that you need to go get by on, and again makes you very authentic in your choices, right? So when I left Discovery to start my own company, maybe other people would have thought about that decision a lot, right? For me, it was like, it's okay. Like if I'm not the Discovery CEO and I don't make a lot of money, I've trained my life to be living on very little, right? So I think that's allowed choices to be very free and authentic, right? So I would say, in terms of daily discipline, I would say the spiritual practice of meditation has been a very formative part of life. But in terms of like a wider philosophy, I think the stoicism, willful poverty, living training yourself to live with very less is very, very helpful to make authentic choices, owning little, so I've never bought a house, I've never bought a car, I think all these things help a lot. Yeah.
That is something. Now, for most of the audience who are tuning in and who very much are impressed with your story and are absorbing all these wonderful stories that you're sharing, one of the challenges that most of us face is this, state A or a state B or a hot state versus cold state. What do you call it? The empathy gap. Right? On 31st of December, we're all pumped up. On 1st of January, we're all pumped up. And then by the time it's end of January, our resolutions have gone for a toss. Our plans have gone for a toss. And we are back to where we were. And in some cases, it goes back to a worse state, especially with people dealing with addictions or diets. Is there any recommendation or any point of view that you want to share?
Yeah, there should be a governing philosophy in life. I mean, my governing philosophy is that basically through lots of experiments and ups and downs, at some stages, my novels have done very well. Some novels have done very badly. Some of my efforts in Discovery did very badly. The startup has done well. I've lived through a lot of ups and downs. And in the end, my conclusion is that, look, the output is totally out of your hand. The input is in your control. And to treat life like a bit of a slot machine, right? You just have to play the slots every day with full energy. Sometimes you'll hit a jackpot, sometimes you'll go broke, and you can't predict because it's a bit of a slot machine. You put your max energy and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I try to think of life like a bit like a slot machine, right? Where the only gift I owe life is my energy and nothing else. So I just wake up with a lot of energy daily and give it my all. And sometimes it works spectacularly, sometimes it fails spectacularly. And I'm a bit indifferent to those two states, Yeah.
So all right, life is a game. The objective is to play. I think that's what you're saying.
Just show up with full energy, not even play. Just show up with full energy, and the play happens automatically.
All right.
So I don't face too many energy crises at all, right? Because I feel like that's the only gift I owe my life is energy every day. I can't control the output. I can't control what happens, but I do owe it the energy every day. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That pretty much also a good amount of what you say ties down around research and discussions around the whole procrastination that we do, where you talk about Stoic philosophy, and I think there is something from Seneca which says we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The whole idea of actually starting the task is much more overwhelming to us. And that is what puts us off in the first place, as opposed to the task itself. And, half of the battle isn't just showing up. So thank you for that. Now, there is something which we keep on talking about, which is the imposter's syndrome, right? This is something people face everywhere in the world. Supermodels go through it, actors go through it. Uh, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of the tech giants, they actually have it inbuilt into their orientation program in the first week. And the question I think a lot of people have in mind is, does Karan Bajaj also deal with an imposter syndrome, or did he deal with an imposter syndrome? And if so, was there a fake it till make it mentality somewhere out there?
I'm trying to reflect overall, but I think a little bit is that kind of my progression towards milestones has been a little bit more, it hasn't been sudden. So it's not like I was 21 when I sold my startup for $300 million and suddenly I don't know why I got so lucky. I think, I mean, there's a lot of fortune involved in everything, but right, like in the sense that, like, I think I've had my share of very, very severe failures also, right? So in that sense, right, just before the startup, for example, I would say that my discovery CEO phase in India was not successful by any measure, right? I tried to do a lot and wasn't able to accomplish much of what I set out to do, right? And I had some pretty public failures. I launched TV channels that didn't work. So I've had my share of wounds, right? So in the end, when you have your own share of wounds and and when you have your share of triumphs, right, neither of them feel like an imposter in either ways, right? You just feel that, look, the nature of the creative life of building something is that most of the time it won't work, right? So the thing is that the nature of the builder's life is that most of the time what you build is not going to work because the world typically doesn't need one more new creation, right? The world is running as it is. You create something out of nothing. In most cases, it'll be rejected, right? But the creator's destiny in life is to keep creating, right? And I've just kind of like felt like that, right? For the last decade, I've been writing novels. There's that it works, it doesn't work. I'm just a little bit like more like that. I like my destinies to create. So imposter syndrome and stuff is feeling exceptionally insecure about success, or I feel neither secure nor insecure about success. I just feel like you'll get more wounds than successes, but when it comes your way, be happy about it, right? Don't don't question it. And if it doesn't come your way, also don't question it too much, right? It's just the nature of the creator's life.
There is a certain stoic approach out there towards the outcomes that
right, call it stoic, or just a guy who's like stumbled more often than it has worked, right? So it's like you just learn your lessons, yeah.
So I notice you very comfortably talk about your failures, and we live in a society where more often than not, all we want to celebrate is successes, and especially Eastern societies. And I could be wrong here, but based upon my limited understanding, as opposed to societies in the West, which are very much okay with the whole comeback stories, right? Where someone fails and makes it big. Out here, we kind of find it a bit, difficult to give second chances. So given those realities, Karan, if you could share with us some of your learnings, from those failures for our audiences, because we are pretty much used to celebrating the Mark Zuckerberg who has dropped out of college and say, hey, look at that, your college is not important, while conveniently forgetting all the other millions of people who have dropped out and never really made it big. There's a lot of survivor's bias in play out here. Your suggestions and your advice.
My first point is that I actually think India is very open to that right now. So if I look at a resume like mine, 20 years ago, nobody would have accepted it. 20 years later, I think we grew up in a liberalized India, right? To I think to our great fortune, right? If you look at my resume, it's a lot of starts and stops, right? I mean, it's not by no means is it a straight line of any kind, right? It's a very discontinuous kind of a line with reaching somewhere, leaving it again, doing something from scratch, starting again, scratch. It's just a discontinuous, like in my head, it was a very logical. I was kind of learning and expanding a lot in different dimensions as a human being, and I took my time to do that. But I actually think that India is very open, right? Maybe 20 years ago, a Discovery CEO would have been a very linear kind of a path. But they took when they gave me the offer to be Discovery CEO, I was a full-time novelist for 18 months. So like, like I actually feel like this is a new world. People like us will be, there's like the weak shall inherit the earth kind of a feeling, the meek shall inherit the earth. So yeah, people like us who are on their own paths are like doing well enough, or are being accepted enough.
Karan, thank you so much for that. And I can see a question pop up, and it's from Ujjwal Tamang.
Yeah.
And it says, do you think that your willingness to take a risk came from the fact that you had a safety net, be it an IIM degree or maybe a consulting background or being a CEO? A question for you right now.
I mean, yes,
Ujjwal.
absolutely. See, I don't know of a sliding doors alternate life, right? In which psychologically, I don't know what the impact of not having an IIM degree would have been. I don't know the answer to that. So definitely, yes, I was like having a IIM degree makes you secure. But to be very honest, it's a mindset more than anything else. When I left my job to write a novel or to be a novelist for 18 months, I had two small kids, right? And I was living in New York, and it was very expensive. And you don't really have a safety net per se, right? Like, yeah, I mean, as big or as small a safety net as anybody. Like I don't have any family money or anything like that. So, yeah.
Karan, what you talked about earlier about having lived an entire life where you've gone through, multiple ups and downs, which gives you this certain approach towards saying, my job is to simply play or show up, as you say, right? Now, this comes with an experience of, living a certain life, doing things in a particular way. Now, unfortunately, while being on this side of 30 or early 40, 50, 60s does give you experience, it is not really very easy when you are like, late teens, early 20s, because at that point of time, the whole experience of living the life has not yet been done. And there are many preconceived notions that most of us are struggling with at that point of time, saying, you know what, you need this, you need connections, you need money, you need a certain family. What would you like to say to someone who is really young right now, about this?
Young is very good, right? Like when I left my job for the first time to backpack, it was very easy because I was 28 and I didn't have a wife or kids or anything like that. So 28 was very good to do that, right? Because the decision or the risk was entirely mine. The next time I took a year off to learn yoga, it was my wife and I that time, and she had to leave her job as well. More complex, right? The next time I took a year off to write a novel, or a couple of years off to write a novel, I had two small kids, who were growing up in the US, and it became progressively harder. So I think it might be actually the easiest at when your baggage in life is very light, But in general, my general philosophy is that at every age, just keep yourself very light, Like don't buy furniture, don't have houses, don't have cars, and you'll just typically be much better off without any of that stuff, right? I mean, I do invest, but I invest in very liquid assets like the equity markets and stuff, right? Whenever you tie yourself down to these things, then life becomes complex, right? And when you don't tie yourself down to these things, then life is very free and like somewhat easier.
Yes, thank you for that. One.
I have a last question. I have 3:28, so I have 2 minutes. Batao.
All right, all right. The last question here is, what do you think has changed in countries like India and other nations that you have traveled around? Because these were not about startup culture. They were not about innovation at all. And now suddenly you have fantastic companies coming up, unicorns every 2 months.
Correct.
What happened here?
What happened is really economic forces, I think, more than anything else. Like I don't know, economic forces will shape cultural forces, right? The economic forces are that I mean, there is a rising consumer which requires custom solutions, and obviously startups will deliver those custom solutions. And yeah, I mean, like I think it's and that's obviously shaping the culture. And then obviously you have stories like ours, right? And everybody's like, okay, 18 months, $300 million, I can all like, so obviously you have stories like these come up, right? Silicon Valley like stories come up in India. More people want to take the plunge, then more people will take the plunge, more success will emerge, more people will come. It's a very virtuous cycle right now. And I think stories like ours are very needed, right? Stories like ours are needed to inspire the next set of people who are in their jobs thinking that they should take a leap. and the country needs entrepreneurs, right? We creating jobs, like multiplying opportunities, right? So I think it's a great cycle right now. It's a great time.
Thank you so much, Karan. You have a crazily busy schedule.
No, not
And,
at all. It's a real pleasure
yeah,
to speak to you guys. Yeah.
and I think everyone out here who is tuning from all over the world, we have some 7,000 people last I understood. Thank
Wonderful.
you on behalf of all of them.
Oh, it's a delight, a pleasure. Thank you for the questions and thank you for having me.